Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'll say it again. Good morning. I was on mute.
Good morning.
Welcome to 2021.
Welcome to 2021. Hey, Bob.
Yes, sir.
Sorry about I got your voicemail that you left at my office at 6:54 last night. It popped up. It took 3 hours. I know it was funny because it was stamped at 3 whatever time you left it, and it actually popped up at 3 hours later. So I got to figure out what happened there. Sorry about that.
All right. So we're gonna call them. Bob, Todd said he would not be here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then we have everybody else present. West County EMS, would you mind introducing yourself to we're going to go around real quick, and we'll do it right after we do introductions. We'll do a call to order. So I know the West County EMS staff from that standpoint. Actually, we'll do the call to order. We'll do the attendance and we'll do it that way. Sorry. All right. So we're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to do a approval of agenda that was submitted. Do I have a motion to approve the today's agenda for January 21st? George, approve. Is there a second?
I second.
Second.
Amber seconds it. All right. And then we'll do a roll call. So just for both the EMS West County gentlemen that are joining us, Ryan Mortland, an alderman for Ward 3, and then also the Police, Fire, and EMS Commission Chair. I get to spend a lot of time with you guys. So Sue, would you like to go next?
Yes, Sue. Sorry, I talked. Sue Allen, Ward 4, Alderman. I am Chairman of Ways and Means Commission. Thank you.
Okay. Amber?
Amber Walsh. I'm Ward 2 resident, and this is the third time I've served on this committee. So pleased to be back on again.
Perfect. George?
George Tarlas. I'm a Ward 1 resident and my first time on this committee, so I'm the new J of the group.
That's good. And you also serve on Public Works, correct?
I do. Sorry, I do serve on Public
Oh,
Works.
that's good. That's good. Don? Oh, we can't hear you, Don.
You're muted. He's muted.
Okay. Morgan, can you unmute him, please? Here you go. Okay. So we'll work on Don's audio. So you can look at it for a second. We'll go and then we have Bob and Morgan here, and then Chief, if you both would like to introduce yourself. And Dave.
Sure. Jeff Sadler, Chief of West County EMS and Fire.
And I'm Dave Frazier, Deputy Chief, West County EMS and Fire.
Perfect. And then Bob, just for the record, show that the Ted Solomon was not present.
Actually, I'm on the call. I'm on the call.
Oh, great, Todd. Great.
Yeah. So
So
I'm sorry, guys. They are right now working on the Wi-Fi in my house, so I can't Zoom. So I'm actually on the phone call.
No worries.
So anyway, Todd Solomon, Ward 4, first time on the committee. Honored to be so.
Great. And then Don's coming back in. Hopefully we'll get his audio. Is he?
Can you hear me now?
We can. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Don.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulty. I'm on vacation and the internet's spotty where I'm at. My name's Don Sanders. I'm in Ward 1, and I'm on the EMS, Fire, and Police Commission.
Most definitely. Thank you. Okay. The minutes from December 17th meeting have been distributed. Are there any questions? If not, all those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
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 Good. All right, going right into the content now. So the goal today is we've invited Chief Sadler and Dave Frazier to discuss the items where we were talking about location of firehouse locations, options, and different staffing areas. Bob, do you want to go into anything else before we kind of go into a little bit of those presentations?
Thank you, Alderman. So just as a little bit of background, we had some general discussion about some options that had been discussed, and we determined it would be good at this point to bring in both Chief Sadler and Deputy Chief Frazier, just to provide a little bit more color and background. I also, after we have some basic information, and I believe they're open to any of your questions and would like this to be interactive, but I also have some information. Police Chief Cavens was not able to be here today. He sends his regrets. But I do have information from him on some needs of the police department as far as substation location and amenities that I'll be glad to share.
Thank you, Bob. I'm not sure if anybody else is getting a little interference. Don and Todd, if you don't mind muting yourself when you're not talking, that'd be great. Okay. So most definitely, and so kind of bring it back to the task force's purpose and why we have the chief here and kind of going through this is the goal is to look out 10, 15, 20 years and say, where is Town and Country going to be? What do the residents need? And where are we currently not, at the level we want to be? And we're talking with Chief Sadler many times, the key areas, especially around EMS, is response time and making sure we're providing that service to our citizens as protecting and serving them from that function is critical. So we have the one fire station right now, and then we also have the West County EMS Fire and EMS fire station that is on Manchester Road down by Mason, helps support it, and then we have the Crief Corps. So those are the areas. So I'm going to kick it to Chief Sadler to kind of discuss some of those items, just on locations that have been presented in the past. Any thoughts, anything, and feel free to ask questions. Just if you want to raise your hand or we Chief can call on you afterwards and it'll just, be able to handle it from there. So Chief, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting us. This is something that the conversation about the coverage in Town and Country has been ongoing. Dave could probably elaborate because it's well before my time. As call volumes have increased, as the population of the city has increased, the demands on the service have increased, obviously, which has resulted in the geographic gaps being more pronounced, I guess, would be a one way to put it. So in the more recent history, say the last 3 to 5 years, the discussion has been primarily focused on the areas around, just for simplicity's sake, without bringing wards into the equation, the 141 and 40 area have generally been discussed, and it's gone from the city pre Bob Shelton had looked at property associated with Maryville, mainly because of the relationship there. We did some research with GIS that has shown us that that isn't probably the best location. An area somewhere, if just for simplicity's sake, if you're familiar with where the salt storage is by MoDOT, on 141 near Highway 40, that's probably about somewhere in that general area is would be very beneficial to response times. We have talked quite a bit, some with this group, Ryan, whoever is a representative to the fire district, whether it's Ryan right now, Alderman Butler prior to, or Alderman Fauci before her. We've had conversations about the existing fire station and the efficiencies or lack thereof with that station, particularly if you add a second fire station. The response times out of there would be most leveraged, I guess, if it were slightly east of that location. So somewhere probably on the east side of the Principia property would be ideal. But even as far east as the existing city hall would provide really good coverage. So that's kind of a general, really 35,000 foot view. And honestly, I think it may be more beneficial to just have a discussion about it, or answer questions from you guys, ladies and gentlemen, because we can, without getting overly technical, I could go on and on about this all day.
And we all were present for the initial meeting where Chief Sadler went over the response time, the reason why time is critical, and then he laid out all those stats from that time. So the goal of this is really to look at and try to throw things out from we're putting funding aside. What are options that we could solve this problem for the current, but also look into the future needs and create creative solutions. So task force, I'm opening it up to you for questions.
This is Todd. And I know we talked in detail about this in a prior meeting that when you were present, but to refresh my memory again, if let's say this is something that we're going to do, from the second we say go, approximately how long does it take? Because at that location, sounds like we'd be building pretty much, not renovating, we'd be starting from scratch. So how long would that process take till it's completed, approximately?
I'll kick this over to Chief Frazier he's been down this road numerous times, and he's done the research for this particular project. So Dave, you want to take it?
Sure, Chief, thanks. Todd, in response to your question, so we need to basically start from the beginning with the new station, right? So we need to acquire some land, go through all the necessary requirements of planning and zoning, architectural review, et cetera, have some community meetings with the community. So it's probably at a minimum a 2-year process we would estimate from start to finish before we can throw bodies in there with fire trucks and ambulances rolling out the door. And now that's probably on the best case scenario. Worst case, it'd be a little longer than that based on whatever the delay was. But I think to keep in your mind, it would be at least a 2-year process.
Okay. And then I guess my last question about that location is we've spoken about multiple locations, and some have a ladder truck, some have additional vehicles. We're talking about possibility of having space for like a satellite location for the police. and perhaps even a storage facility. Is
Correct.
that location large enough to accommodate all of it, or would that be something that you think would only be adequate enough to satisfy the need for the fire station?
Now you're specifically talking about Salt Mill right now.
Correct.
We haven't done an engineering review of that site I mean, just speaking completely freely, we haven't really investigated it at face value. We think we can make it work. I think ultimately, if we really wanted to make it work, we could make it work. But to answer your question, it would be, there's a little bit of speculation there. And to your point, the goal would be to, particularly that location, having a ladder truck there would be really beneficial.
Okay.
Todd, just to follow up on your question about that location, the city has 2.6 acres at that Salt Dome facility. We've got a 6,000 square foot building where the current firehouse is 3.4 acres. The one thing I'll note about the current Salt Dome location is there is significant additional, like double what the city has, of MoDOT right-of-way out there that I would imagine we would be able to work out something for a portion of that MoDOT property. So if that helps clarify that location and room for a facility there, I think there would be room for a facility because the current fire station is 11,000 square feet. I think Dave told us optimal is 15,000, Dave?
Chief and Dave, do you have any concerns on the traffic pattern, the ingress and egress from that 141?
Well, we always have concerns. It's just to what level those concerns. I mean, if we're comparing that to what we've got with our Manchester Road access, it doesn't give us a lot of heartburn, to be honest with you. I think we'd have to work a couple of things out, but it's manageable.
And the other question I had was the ladder beneficial is that primarily due to the businesses around the area that have more than one, two stories?
Yeah, we actually, we lost 3.5 points in our ISO review the last time because of our lack of proximity with a ladder truck to that particular area.
Other questions?
I think it was 3.5 points, wasn't it, Dave? Somewhere around.
Approximately, I don't recall the exact number.
So let's keep focusing on the salt mill option as we kind of go through. We'll talk about a couple different options, but what are the questions with regards to the salt mill option?
So what would be I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting, but in our first meeting with you, Chief, and Dave as well, you talked about the existing station and all the challenges there. I think you described it as if it were up to you, you'd tear it down. It's because of the inefficiencies of it. What would be the implications to the existing station if contemplating this the salt mill for a new station? What would be the interchange in terms of services provided, or what would be the plan to?
Well, I think, and Dave, you feel free to jump in here as well. I think the city at this point, under the arrangement that we've got, completely dictates the level of service that's provided. So if there was an additional station on Salt Mill added to whatever degree the station wanted, or the city wants to staff that, we're kind of at your, for a lack of a better phrase, beck and call. So it really is going to be determined by the city. Now, if you're asking me as the fire chief what we would do, if I was carte blanche, we're doing what we need to do. Let me back up. If I'm making the decision on it, what we would do is we would put the station at Salt Mill, and we would find another location somewhere east on Clayton from the current fire station, and the city can repurpose the existing fire station for whatever they want to use it for, which those conversations obviously have taken place as well. Mainly because, well, there's a couple of reasons. Number one is the inefficiency of the existing building. The other part is if you've got a fire station at that off 141 and 40, and your response times are actually going to be, you're going to be able to balance your response times better having a station a little bit further east on Clayton, if that makes sense. So
It does, because I'm in Ward 1, and I think Ward 1 has the slowest response times. And so the new station wouldn't do anything for that, so to speak. And I'm not talking about just Ward 1, but
yeah,
I get the point.
yeah, you've got an area of the city that, Ward 2 and parts of Ward 3 really get outstanding, tremendous response times, because you've got a fire station in town and country, and then you've got our station 2 on the south side that covers Ward 2, the south end of Ward 2, extraordinarily well. And then there's Ward 1 and Ward 4 that are frankly are not well covered.
So it would, I'll finish with this. So in your opinion, just adding a station, regardless of where it is, won't really be the optimal outcome without doing something else.
That's correct.
Well,
Okay.
can I ask one more question then? I mean, would it make sense for the cost that we would incur to have, now obviously Salt Mill sounds like it'll satisfy more than one need, but just staying on the firehouse for those purposes, would it make sense for the cost we would have for one firehouse to perhaps have 2 satellite firehouses, one that will satisfy Ward 4 and the other one Ward 1, as opposed to all the funds that would go into take to just develop the salt mill?
Well, the construction cost to, like, when you say a satellite station, I assume you mean a smaller footprint. Is that your?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct,
we
correct.
discussed last meeting, Chief Sedler, just, looking at some of the other municipalities around, and some of them had, I have to look back at my notes. Some of them had 2 sites, one primary and one with just a pumper and an ambulance. Well, I would, I guess what we're talking about isn't, they're not going to be, I wouldn't view them as primary, as what I view as primary, I guess in our case is like the building that I'm sitting in right now at 223 Henry, which has quite a bit of office space, as well as 4 bays, double bays. If you've ever been here, it's quite a large
Community
building.
room. Yeah.
Right. As opposed to our fire station number 2, which is at Mason and Manchester, that is really, it's 2 bays and living quarters for the crews. That's really what we're talking about. So I don't, if you're asking my opinion, which you are, I don't know that you could go a whole lot smaller. We're talking about facility that would be able to house a pumper or ladder truck and an ambulance, and living quarters for the crew is really, now we will, I know Bob wants to get into, this really probably needs to be, in my opinion, more of a holistic public safety conversation, which includes the law enforcement end of it. And I know if Chief Cavens were here, he would be voicing those opinions, and we can get into that as well, as if you want.
So, Chief, if I could.
Sure.
The current station has an ambulance, a pumper, and a rescue kind of truck. Is that correct?
Yeah, it actually has a brush, it's a brush truck, which means it's got a small water pump, a small water tank and a pump. And then it also trailers an off-road, it's a UTV, it's an off-road ambulance for Queenie Park, it's a Kubota. It's just
Or any park.
yeah, any park, right.
Yeah. And so to put the pumper, and I'm just saying, hypothetically, a ladder truck at the salt mill location, and I assume an ambulance,
Mhm.
and then at a second east location, right? Best case, an east location, a pumper and an ambulance. Is that optimal? Am I somewhere in the right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, and the deployment model that we would be looking at is ultimately yes, there would be a ladder truck. There would be a ladder truck and an ambulance at one location and a rescue pumper and an ambulance at another location. And that's based on not only the ISO end of things, but really just the operational service deployment model.
And my last question is, do you need additional staffing for the ladder truck?
No.
Okay.
I mean,
Back in the day, you had to have extra people on the back.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're following, if we would follow NFPA guidelines across the board, that would be a really uncomfortable financial conversation. So it's ideally you have 5 people staffing a ladder truck all the time. We have our minimum staffing is 3, full staffing is 4. So we're just not, we're financially, that would be a whole different ball game.
So both of these stations, the ladder ambulance and the pumper ambulance, both stations are minimum 5?
Correct.
Thank you.
With normal staffing of 6,
Right.
like our other stations is how we do it. So, and if I may interject, just so everybody was clear on that, you say an aerial and a pumper rescue of some type, we also need to consult and liaison with ISO, who oversees the rating system that is beneficial for the insurance services, and then the discounts on homeowners and commercial property rates. So that model may change a little different because our recent rating, we're a 2. But like Chief said, we got gigged for not having an aerial device up in town and country. So we're pretty close to a 1, which could help all those insurance rates. So when you start making that new and the vision to have another station and do things, we want to bring in those partners to make sure we're getting the best for our dollars, if you will, and we're doing the right thing, equipment and delivery wise for the community. So.
Can I ask a question on, just to make sure that I understand on the current trucks? So I understand what ideally we want at 2 different locations, but when you reference at the current station, the brush truck, and I appreciate the explanation of what that is, where does that fall into the current needs if you've got pumper and ambulance at one and then rescue ladder ambulance at another? What does the brush truck constitute?
So the brush truck is cross-staffed we don't have staffing assigned to it.
Okay.
So it's physically located at the fire station in Town and Country. There's several reasons for it. Primarily that the biggest target hazard proximity. We had it at our station too at Mason and Manchester for a while, and really it's the primary use for it most of the time is dealing with stuff at Queenie Park. And we would approach it from the south side. We ended up having to use it, I think, at Howell Island a few times. Long story short, geographically, it made sense. We can still access Queenie, but it puts it in a better spot. But we don't have personnel assigned to it. They will hop over to if it's called out. They just take the pumper down or the ambulance down and deploy that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to clarify though, Queenie Park is not within Town and Country, it's county, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And Chief, so when we need a ladder truck, you're pulling it from either Henry or Manchester?
Right now it's Manchester or or you'll get a ladder from Creve Coeur or Monarch.
Okay.
Usually it's from our station too, though.
In responding, because in our October meeting, I'm just going back through my notes, in responding to the businesses that reside in Town and Country, the schools, churches, and then also hospitals and those things, are ladder trucks required for those?
Generally, it really depends on what the call is. If it's for example, for a commercial alarm or first alarm, it depends on which facility we're going to. There are ladder requirements. Yes, so it will pull in the dispatch. The CAD will pull in aerial equipment.
Okay. And then I'm just looking at your budget. I'm just trying to, which line item, I'm trying to stay away from the finances, so we
Sure.
focus on the solution, but what is the ladder truck called on your budget, just from a investment standpoint?
3525
35. Okay.
or 3595. Dave, you want to jump in here?
And I guess just for reference for the task force, just what is a ladder truck? What's the investment, Dave?
We're getting ready to take delivery on a new one in July, 1.1 million, a little over, right at 1.1 million without equipment on it.
Okay. Just everybody frame of reference there. Okay. What are the questions we have with regards to locations, responses?
I will add, Alderman, that since it's probably a good time, when we talk about the salt mill location, Chief Cavens has indicated that the police department, the Town and Country Police, would definitely benefit from a substation location, not only to have an alternate location. We're very confined in our current facility, just to have for report writing, but they have a significant number of calls also to the commercial area. It allows an opportunity to interview both suspects and victims, also provides a visible presence out on in that vicinity of the community, allows for a facility that could be emergency operations, because it would be a newer, more sustainable facility. So the police chief has several benefits to a type of substation in that area, in that general portion of Town and Country.
And then Bob, before you hop off, will you also talk about the Public Works potential benefit?
So excellent point. We currently at the salt dome, that's all that facility is a salt dome. And we store some equipment there to load salt and to, do various operations, a backhoe. And it's not good to store metal equipment in a salt dome because of the deterioration that results from the salt. So for several years, we have been budgeting to build a separate standalone building at that location to house some equipment, some public works equipment.
And Bob, can you clarify, that was part of a significant discussion? Was that for the 2019 budget? So it's been discussed, and then, this last year, I don't know that it was even brought up. obviously, for the obvious budgeting. But
Correct.
that's,
Yes,
Then-
yeah, it's been in since 2019.
yeah.
Alderman Mortland, if I may interject as well, I think Chief alluded to it a little bit, but to segue on what Bob was saying with the Chief's request and the Public Works, at our 223 Henry, our Station 1 and admin, we also have a community room that has public access for community groups, subdivision meetings, various clubs in the community and stuff, and they use that. So I don't want that to be an oversight either, because we fully intend, if it was strictly the fire district doing it, we would incorporate some aspect of that so the community has some places to go, because we know that's a need. So just want to make sure it made your list.
Thank you. So yeah, and that is on our list. We have, we currently utilize Longview for smaller ones, but this would give us options from a technical capability and then a larger capacity. So thank you. I'm gonna, Todd, George, Don, you have some other questions? I have another question I'm going to ask Bob in a second, but I want to kind of give you guys the option for the floor. So Bob, we've discussed, the current firehouse at Mason, and we discussed, some different options. Obviously, if we move forward and that stays part of our fire EMS solution, what are options to maintain that building? Obviously, and that's one thing we discussed. Another thing is if let's ask that question. I'll have the bigger picture one next. Sorry.
So just so I'm clear, Alderman, you're saying to bring that up to standards to house the fire operations? Is that the question?
When we had that discussion, we talked about, if the Mason Firehouse stays part of our fire solution long term, it'll be there in 2040. What are the items we need to do to maintain it? Either increase capacity, or what are some of the options we were kind of going over there?
Yeah, we're actually going to be meeting with an architect and an engineer this afternoon, just from a very, very, high level look at it. But I think the numbers are going to be in excess of $1 million to really renovate. The city has done some renovations to try to weatherproof and increase the environmental HVAC and living arrangements. It's an old facility, and as the chief has said, it's an old brick. In the winter, it's a cold facility. In the summer, it heats up like a brick oven. So we're going to look into it. But to be honest, I believe the number will exceed $1 million to renovate it.
Yeah, I just wanted the task force to kind of hear that, and then the other one or two items that were discussed. If you could wave a wand and you said, let's take funding and put it over here, the potentially utilizing Salt Mill and then the current city municipal center is more, services oriented as opposed to City Hall. We kind of discussed, potentially looking at some kind of solution there to where they're on both sides, and then we could leverage the the Manchester West County EMS to handle kind of the main artery up Mason. We haven't gotten too far into that conversation, but is there any thoughts on that, or anything from the task force after you talk about? Did he freeze?
Oh,
Okay.
so I'm sorry. The question for me is,
The question is, if knowing the current, I'll say knowing our current facilities that we have that the city owns, is there, we kind of threw out there as a curveball of saying, and I think Chief Sadler said, if we utilize the city hall as one side and Salt Mill as the other. Is there any option, or, I mean, I know it's a funding issue, but of moving things around, or anything at City Hall that we could add an ambulance and a pumper?
I think you could definitely make renovations, add on to the building here to house some additional fire equipment. And if you're vacating the current fire station, just obviously if you're looking, very, again, high level, and you could potentially move some city hall operations up to what's the current fire station, and have two public safety facilities, and make the current fire station potentially some type of city hall more operation. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. I know there's dollars associated with that. Any thoughts from the task force on some type of solution like that? Questions? Go ahead, Amber.
No, I'm sorry. I'd had to step away for just a minute, so I actually didn't hear the last solution, but I can catch up later. I don't mean to take us backwards. I apologize.
No worries. And I know that's going to be expensive. As we look to staff two houses, and there'll be an increase in budget, obviously in funding, but the other consideration is, are we solving both? Are we solving the long-term picture of all the square miles of town and country for response time? And that's one of the, the goals that we're trying to really accomplish. Any thoughts to that, Chief, or any other comments on any of those options?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation to have, because you're talking about, it's a touchy subject, right? But if we're here to discuss it, so I guess let's discuss it. My perspective and the beauty of my position, I think I mentioned this first time I met with you, all of you as a group, is my lane's pretty well defined. Our lane is providing fire rescue and EMS services for the city and the fire district, obviously. The fact of the matter is, there's kind of no easy way to dip your toe in the water. It's whatever you do, what you're doing now is expensive. There's no way around it. I mean, you've all seen the budget. It's expensive. To continue doing what you're doing is expensive. To improve upon it is really expensive. The decision that I think you need to make is, do you want to solve the deficiencies and inefficiencies? Do you want to keep doing what you're doing? If you do nothing at all, you're still spending $4 million a year when it's all said and done. And that's for the people who are on either end, whether it's Ward 1 or Ward 4, at any given moment, they're going to be waiting 8 minutes for an ambulance or a truck. Depending on the time of day and the circumstances, it could be longer. So I think the real question is that acceptable? And to me, it's not, as the fire chief. But like I said, my lane is very defined, very well defined. I think, Ryan, you and I had a conversation. It's probably been my memory's not what it used to be. It's probably been 2 months ago with the pandemic. I don't remember much. The conversation that you and I had, the easiest, in my mind, solution to this, and this is, again, my perspective, is you have to find a funding mechanism if you really want to fix it, because you can't there's the capital expenses of doing anything substantial that are one thing, but really the expense is operating the service, and that doesn't go away. Regardless, it isn't going away right now. Sorry, my lights are turning off on their own. The until you establish that funding mechanism that supports what you decide you want to do, it's going to be, you're kind of in a loop, because I will tell you the answer to your question that I would give you is the funding mechanism needs to be established for the level of service that you want to provide. And maybe that exists right now. Maybe it's what you're doing now is what you want to do, and that's the end of it. If you're asking me, you have significant service gaps that have been around for a while. They're not going to get any better, even with a pandemic and call volumes decreasing. The response times are still, even though the response times are better because call volumes are down, they're still not great. If I'm in the difficult position that as an elected official that you are, I would put it to the people and say, what do you want to do? Ask the residents that live there, here are your options. You can leave it alone, we'll do nothing, or we can do X, Y, or Z, and it's going to cost you as a resident this. And that's just my 2 cents though, because I can tell you if you magically handed this over to the fire district today, I know exactly what we would do. And it would be done in 2 years, and we wouldn't even be talking about it anymore. And I don't mean that to be flippant at all. So I apologize if it sounds that way.
George?
Not at all.
So Ryan, it's no different than anything else. It's, it always comes down to the money. and that it's, if our job as a task force is to come up with what we believe to be the best long-term solution for this gap or deficiency in service times and coverage, then, and you asked us at the very beginning to strip out the budgeting part. Let's talk about the solutions first and then figure out how to fund it. Of course, they go hand in hand at some point, but to me, I think we got to start with what do we want as the optimal outcome. And then it's like budgeting for anything. You start chipping away at what's reality. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about funding sources, and I appreciate everything that the chief was talking about. I don't think it's uncomfortable at all. Such a huge part of the city's budget is on this stuff, and we got to get it right. And it's not right. So if you're asking the task force to come up with what's the best solution, not what do we think we could maybe do given the funding, I don't think we're doing our jobs. I think we need to ask for what we should ask for. And if we get brought back down to a financial reality, then we adjust. And maybe we have A, B, and C as our recommendations in the end. So to me, I think we got to look at what the cost would be at the most optimal solution. I love hearing the suggestion about having this bookend salt mill and current city hall building, just as a thought. Repurpose the existing station for more administrative. That seems like it accomplishes a lot of things on service times and all the stuff that we've talked about. Is that a financial possibility? I don't know. That's the next phase. But to me, I think rather than say, well, it's not budgeted for today, I think our job should be, what do we think the best solution is? What's the best long-term solution for what we need? Let's target that. Let's look at what the budgeting would be. And if we need to be backed off from that, then we go to plan B or plan C. But I don't think it's that difficult of a discussion. I think you got to pay for what you want or what you get. Get what you pay for. Lesson I've been telling my kids since they were old enough to understand it. And to me, with how Town and Country's grown and how big the city limits are and what we all expect in terms of services, I don't think we our first shot is, well, let's settle for this, that, or the other. Anyway, that's how I think we should view it, as the best possible solution.
Yeah, and Chief, I don't think you should be mincing words with us. So I appreciate that, because, you know, we certainly have to go back as a task force, and also what's within our purview, right? Versus we make recommendations to the Board of Aldermen. So we don't make these decisions, we make recommendations, we do the legwork. And I appreciate you being frank. That's absolutely expected, and it helps us to do our jobs better to hear you say you have significant service gaps. I appreciate hearing that. And then we can decide how best to deal with that. And something that you won't have to deal with, obviously, as a fire district, but we'll have to think about as a task force, and the board will certainly, is that this does impact wards differentially. And that's something that is, you know, adds trickiness to the conversation, because some wards feel it more than others. Mine does not. I'm in 2, and I'm in the southern part of 2. So, you know, that's a tricky part of this, but don't mince words with us.
Well, I appreciate that. And the beauty of the situation in particular that you're in is that regardless of what happens, your service is going to be really good, because you're on the south side. You're going to get, I mean, George, can I call you George? You're
Only because that's my name, but yes.
I 100% agree with your assessment. And if we're speaking completely candidly, and I know I've had this conversation with Chief Cavens. Even though he's only been with Town and Country for less than 2 years, he and I have had this conversation so many times that I've lost count. If we're writing the plan as a public safety document, what you just described is it's a no-brainer. It fixes in one fell swoop like that. And that's what I meant. If, for example, and take the politics out of it, if we waved a magic wand and you were part of the fire district tomorrow, I have every confidence that between Bob and the Board of Aldermen, we could work out an arrangement with a property that the city already owns to make it a very mutually beneficial service arrangement involving the current city hall location and the salt mill location. You'd have a much broader, not only public safety, not only fire and EMS, but law enforcement footprint that we both feel. To say that we feel strongly about it is a massive understatement. And it's not, it is strictly service oriented, period, end of story. So I hope that helps.
It helps a lot. Sue, can you remind us what percentage of the city's budget is public safety?
Top of my head, I think it's about, go ahead. It's about around 80.
80%, very good.
I mean, you know, again, I had it like 75% or something. I mean, that's as huge. You have to get that right. I mean, it dwarfs everything else. And if we're doing that half-heartedly, we need to address it. And we need to ask for what we need to ask for to get it done. We got to listen to the chiefs. And that's what they're telling us that we need. And I put my trust and confidence in the practitioners. You listen to your doctor, you listen to your investment advisor, you listen to your lawyer. Same thing holds true here, and we need to take into account what they're telling us. So anyway.
I'd like to weigh in at this point. And actually, I always challenge my doctor, and we've been challenging our professionals, and that's what we should do. But as someone who say, has to or is dealing with the politics from the political aspect of it, to me, it's a matter of priority, and it's what is the philosophical stance of people in our community. Is the first role of government public safety? I happen to believe it is. And there's a lot going on with how we have and we continue to spend money. Is the primary role of our municipal government, of town and country, is it more important to provide trails and sidewalks, or is it more important to have what we need to protect our citizens? And, I've asked Chief Jeff before, and focused on the some of the higher response times in Ward 4. And it's like, and I've asked the question, has anybody died? Well, people, unfortunately, we lose people all the time, and we can't say, and Jeff has said, yes, we don't know what a cause of death is, but to me, our responsibility is to have access for the safety of people. And I know, we have Muirfield, and we have some very northern subdivisions and residents in 4, and fortunately, maybe they get help from Creve Coeur, the areas north. And I know Ward 1 can get maybe help from Frontenac. How many ambulances do we have? Do we have one ambulance, Jeff? Yes. Okay. So what would we do? Have we ever had a situation, and I'm not looking for a yes, no, but what would we do in a situation where stuff is happening in more than one location? And I don't know. We have to listen to what we hear from residents and what people have a view of town and country. It's a great place to live. It's beautiful. We have connectivity. Obviously we have to keep our streets safe, but and we have a good. I'm not going to say a great contract with EMS. We have great services from EMS, and then to me, the contract is going to define how much it's going to cost us. So we have great services from West County. We have a great police department, but they can only work with, I believe, in my opinion, they can only work with what we give them to work with. So I think, as with everything else, and you talked about how we would fund this, we had a circumstance in the last year with all the cuts with COVID. We had choices to make, and we saw the way that came down for the possibility of a one-time 10-cent property tax. If you had a home of $650,000, that would have been $125 a year. Before COVID and since COVID, I'm looking, it's like I've saved probably that much not going to Starbucks this year. So, a big part would have to be to message and make public safety a priority. And I think that's putting the rubber to the road. I think that's, in my opinion, and I'm all out. I'm all in for that. So, sorry, that's my soapbox.
Thanks, Sue. So I'm going to let Todd or Don, do you have anything else, questions or anything to add?
I would just
I don't
say it's go ahead.
Go ahead, Todd.
I'm sorry, Don. Sue, I completely understand. I agree wholeheartedly with your comments. My concern, and this is something that maybe is curbed for a different meeting where, the chiefs aren't on the call, but people normally vote for selfish reasons, for things that primarily benefit or they vote against things that won't directly benefit them. So I guess my concern is, and again, it's a future conversation, is on the committee and the board, when it comes time to vote for something like this, knowing that what we're talking about is not something that's going to directly benefit Ward 2 or 3, are we going to get the proper support to move forward with what we all know something needs to be done. So I think we definitely need to come up with a plan. A, this is our ultimate, we go hard on it, is what we want, and then a plan B, which is dialed down a little bit to be somewhat of a compromise. But that's been my concern all along is, and I know some people on the board that unfortunately their intentions are good, but the end result is more on a, what's best for them and their community than the overall, which is a concern. So I just want to say that, but we could always curb that for another meeting.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
John?
I'd just like to add, I agree with especially what George was saying, but we need to do what's appropriate for the community, and we need to figure out the best way to make that plan happen. We all know what we need to do. It's just, how do you fund it? What's the best in the best interest of the community? And that's just basically all I have to say.
Yeah, the community as a whole, not divided by wards or anything like that. No, most definitely. Bob, are you signaling, or you okay?
Yeah, no, real quick, I would just like to ask Jeff, I know there had been discussions in the past for countywide services. I think there was even maybe a small study with the Better Together about regional fire and EMS. And assuming if something like that were to take place, my guess is, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, if we had a regional fire service, there would still be a need, or I'm asking, would there still be a need to have a station kind of in the east quadrant of town and country and in the northwest quadrant?
Yeah, so yes, the answer to the question is yes. We were part of that process when that was taken. We were asked to help develop that plan, which is, I'll circle back to the funding part of it, but I'm looking over your shoulder at that map, and there was a map and Dave, you may remember this. We met down off Brentwood, and they had a big map of the whole county with all the fire stations pinned on it, electronically pinned on it. And we were just advising, but there was they literally went through response times, and it was one of the areas they hit. They're like, you've got big gaps here that need to be fixed. And it went from, I want to say it was 90-ish fire stations in the county. And there were some changes some were eliminated, like especially in the central core where you've got some one-horse towns that maybe could consolidate, but then there were some that were added. And when it came right down to it, to Todd's point, we started out talking about funding. They said, "Oh, just worry about the operation, figuring out the plan, and we'll figure out the funding." And when we got to the end and we had the plan, they said, "Well, yeah, we're not going to be able to figure out a way to fund this." So it was right about the time the Rams were leaving, because I remember they said it'll cost whatever it was going to cost to build a new stadium was what it was going to cost to do the countywide fire service. It was $1 billion or something, whatever it was. It was a lot of money. So anyway, the answer to the question is yes.
And also, this was given to us a couple meetings ago, and if you see right here is where Town and Country is. I'm not good like the meteorologist. So right here, this is the big gap of 141 and 64. That kind of has some of that. So, all right. So let's talk two things. One is just as the options have come, is what you said you could give us the option optimal with a fire district and have that and have your plan. And then I think the other optimal request is what's our optimal as Town and Country contracted. So what are the capital that are needed for both of those? And if we can get those and we can kind of budget those and figure out the dollars, and then we can start talking about funding in our next meeting. And if, if we have to look at what's I call it the best alternative option as a plan B. So the best alternative option and anything that we can have there. And then we're going to start going more into, the actual dollars, the funding piece. And then, how do we take this to the residents?
Is that a question for me or for the whole
No,
group?
it's a request. I mean, unless you have, hey, this is what it would be, if it's the fire
Well,
district.
yeah, no, I mean, given that George has, and let me scroll over and see if I see it. George's background has his financial services logo. Would it make sense for Dave and I to have a chat with George and run through it if he's the financial guy and give him kind of the blow by of maybe a little bit more? And I want to dump it on George's price sitting there saying, yeah, no, that's not happening. It may make more sense to run through it with George. So he, as a financial guy, he can kind of understand what that looks like and bring it back to the group. We're happy to do it with the whole group. It sounds like you'd prefer to do this more as a task force group, which is fine. Whatever you guys want to do, but George, does that sound reasonable, or did I just put you in a really bad spot?
I'm happy to participate however would be helpful to the group. I mean, I would be happy to be part of it. And Sue is the head of Ways and Means, so maybe we could collaborate. I don't know, Sue. I defer to Ryan and Sue on that, but I'm happy to be part of any of that conversation.
George and Todd were both selected with their financial background to be on this task force. So
Either or both.
Or both. But most definitely, if you guys want to have a conversation and kind of model some things and look at that, that'd be great. I think, the request that has come to us is look at the fire district, look at, continued contracting, but we have to invest and to solve the solution. And then looking at both those options.
I think just real quickly at a super, super high level, and Dave, jump in here. We are budgeting as it stands right now. We budget right at $5 million for just a fire station. That's just fire station. And then to equip the fire station is a really complex. We can come up with a number, and that may be better to explain, where we get in a little bit more of the weeds with George and or Todd. But then from a budgeting perspective for the annual expense, the easy 50,000 foot math is you're going to be in the neighborhood of $4 million per station per year for a pumper or ladder truck and an ambulance. And that's kind of the go-to math. And that's whether it's us or, it's going to be plus or minus just a little bit. But like, if you look at Ladue as an example, their annual fire budget is right at $6 million. They've got two stations. One of them's got a pumper and an ambulance, and one of them's just got a pumper. So it's basically 1.5 fire stations at $6 million a year. So if you fully staff that with a pumper and an ambulance or a ladder truck and an ambulance, they're going to be at $8 million, just like we're going to be at $8 million. Dave, you got anything to add from a finance side of it?
No, Chief, you're spot on. And when we look at some most recent analysis of newer fire stations built around the country, we're at 250 to 300 a square foot. So doing simple math and keep it at a high level, those are the starting ballparks. You want to run that out 5 years before you start. You better have some inflationary index in there, but that's where things are going right now.
And we're not, just for the record, we're not talking about, for the people who've paid any attention, if you drive by Mason and Manchester, that we're talking about like that sort of architecture. So if you get into maybe something a little bit more elaborate, that's the popular choice for the residents of Town and Country, it's going to be, if you're looking for a more architecturally appealing building, it's going to cost more money. So just bear that in mind. And I'm not trying to.
The fire district loves to build green and have, solar panels to help augment the electric. I know that's taboo sometimes, but we want to do those energy efficiency things. And even if we can get up to an LED standard or something like that, that's where things are going and moving, and we need to be, and we need to help the environment. So, and unfortunately that costs money, but we're looking at something for 30 to 35 years down the road.
So these numbers you've just given us, that is following that philosophy for the green and moving that way. That's your optimal way of moving forward within
Sue, those numbers I gave you, that 250 to 300 a square foot, were just on a recent analogy in 2020, say from July, maybe June through December, in the industry magazines we get, looking at new stations that have opened and just been built by communities, et cetera. And this is all over the country.
Okay.
The average is in that ballpark. Now, some do very minimal, others do very extravagant. And of course, when I do the analysis on it, they don't tell me all the particular details. I know they have some of the newer things, some really publicize that they're LED certified and, it fits in with their parks in the community, aesthetically, all that stuff. So that's just an average, a rough average. But until we...
Pretty good range too. So based on the range, then that would be what we'd expect. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other discussion items? Obviously, it sounds like we have a next step of scheduling a meeting with George, Todd, Dave, and Chief Sadler, getting that all scheduled. I'm going to have Sue and I step out of that. You guys can take it from that standpoint. So just work the math and if you guys, Bob, the October 12th had a lot of those finances and the rates in there for Todd and for George to look at again. Make sure they have that. Any other discussion items we'd like to discuss with regards to solving the problem, locations, or anything else from a funding standpoint?
Ryan, just a question to confirm. When we meet with Todd and George and we talk things, and Bob will be involved, I'm sure, we're to approach it from a holistic city view, public works, police, and everything, to include some of that stuff, correct? Because that's a big dynamic shift. If we don't, and we leave that piece out hanging, the city comes back later. To get the best picture, I think it's all inclusive from what I've heard today. Is that correct?
So I would agree, but I want to make sure that Sue and Bob are on the same page, and then the task force is in agreement too.
I think we have to. I think we absolutely have to, because if we just look at 2 new fire stations and you ignore the police services and all of the other public works and operations of the city, we're doing a disservice. So absolutely, we need to look at all of that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, does this, I mean, for us to work up or even review financials for that, I mean, we need to pull in other resources. We don't exactly know the cost or the need or any of that for police, nor the expenses for the storage facility. And I'm sure you guys have numbers from that in the past. So there might be another task force or another committee that we might need to pull in just to get figures from. Because if they've explored it in the past, it'd be nice to be able to share their findings so we could actually come to the table with a complete plan of factual figures as opposed to hypotheticals.
Todd, there's a good thing we have Sue, who's in charge of Ways and Means Commission, who's the budget. So she knows all of that. And Bob is here and he obviously is in charge of all that. So we'll be able to have all that data provided to you.
Perfect.
All those numbers. Just Amber and Don and George, just with regards to the approach, is it a fire only, or are we looking at the complete public safety?
I think we need to look at complete public safety, and we need to get Chief Kevins involved in this as well.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that I think, and I'll leave this up obviously to Sue and Ryan, to you, if that's within the purview of what is expected of us on this task force. Pardon, my video just stopped there. I think that's right. I think you can't have the conversation without the police component, particularly since we're talking about something more significant, dramatically more significant than the last couple of times that the task force met and reassessed and renewed the contracts. I think that's right. And just making sure that everyone's comfortable that that's also within this task force purview.
Okay. George?
I was nodding in agreement. I think that was my initial question, is this is a fire and EMS task force. Are we overstepping with regard to what our mandate is? But I'm not sure you can do this without consideration to that. And I think you can strip out the incremental cost or work that needs to be done that relates to police and public works and things like that.
Okay. All right. Well, no, I appreciate your input. Okay, so Sue and Bob, we're gonna get the information, any information Todd and George need to have that next step conversation with West County EMS with regards to funding and building out the optimal solutions for either a fire district or the optimal solution for Town and Country owned and contracted. I think that's most of our items. Task force, we still have we have our next meeting scheduled on February 18th at 8 a.m. I showed up at Longview today, hoping we were having an in-person meeting, but quickly realized there was no cars there. So luckily I live close. Couple items. One I just wanted to say is having the decision on fire alone is in my industry is like building an IT network without considering security or considering how you're going to staff it and do things. So really they work hand in hand, and we're going to bring Chief Cavins into the next meeting, but in the meantime we will still move forward with the optimal solutions that George discussed, and then we'll start having those funding dollar conversations, and then we will schedule. I don't know if everybody is available to schedule the March meeting real quick. I like to have 2 meetings out as opposed to meeting to meeting. So if everybody's okay with March, I'd rather do it earlier in the month due to if there's any travel, and or just to keep this progress moving. So once we get finances, we get Chief Cavins, then we can really keep moving. So trying to get this move forward. So to respect your time also, task force, so we can get, deliverable sooner than later. So we could look at the 4th, if that works. I'm not sure what other days, the 3rd, 4th, or the 4th, the 5th, the 12th. Any of those work for everybody? Same time, same great channel?
Those work for me.
They all work for me.
They all work for me. The 4th and 5th are preferable.
Okay. Todd?
I can't do the 5th. I mean, I might be in Detroit on the 5th, but that's up in the air. I'm not 100% sure, but it's on my calendar. So the 4th would be better for me. We're talking about February, correct?
We're talking about, well, no, we have a February 18th. We're talking about March 4th.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Hold on here. Let's see. Yeah, March 4th is 4th and 5th are good for me.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and Morgan, if you're listening, or Bob, you go ahead and schedule the 4th. In the meantime, Bob, if you don't mind coordinating with the chief and Dave and George and Todd to get that scheduled. Our goal out of that next step is to have that ready by February 18th. Just have that conversation, have a discussion. We'll also have Chief Cavins as part of the next task force meeting, and then we can determine if there's any other agenda items.
Hopefully we could meet at Longview in March.
Potentially, we're going to plan it for Zoom, so everybody's schedules there, if there's travel or anything else. But yes, if everybody's available, and we'll talk about that. I'd like to see some green grass and
Yeah.
get outside too. So, okay. Well, any other items or anything else? Any other comments? And if not, I'd like to, before we end, is just thank you again for your time. I think, this isn't the, talking to the chief's words is, it's not the easiest conversation, but we're not here to have an easy conversation. This is a hard conversation that we're looking for the next 20 years of our citizens' public safety. And, it's not about, from my perspective or Sue's, is about anything political or being righted. This is about us getting these options shown and right for our citizens for their safety. Okay. So, and if that's it, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right. Well, meeting's ended. Thank you all for your time. You have a good day. Thank you, Chief.